Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 24 based on novel. So let's start. Darkness surged. Even the concept of time seemed to have stealthily faded away in the lightless bottom of the dragon transformation pool. At a certain spot within this darkness was a figure covered in thick layers of black viscous water. The water was like sludge and tightly wrapped around the figure such that one was barely able to see the silhouette of a human within. Endless black energy continued to pour in from all around, yet the interior of the sludge remained completely still. This silent infusion continued for an unknown amount of time until a certain moment when the sludge finally trembled all of a sudden. A pair of flickering black eyes appeared within it. Lin Dong opened his eyes as he let out a soft sigh in his heart. He should have already been in this dragon transformation pool for over half a month. Unfortunately, ever since his bones were reconstructed and transformed into top-grade dragon bones, the dragon bones within his body continued to remain at the top-grade level regardless of how much energy he absorbed from this dragon transformation pool. He was clearly still unable to reach that so-called ancient dragon bone level. No wonder the ancient dragon bone is so rare in the dragon tribe, Lin Dong bitterly smiled. He finally understood just how difficult it was for the ancient dragon bone to appear. No wonder only an individual like Elder Qingxi possessed it. I believe this ancient dragon bone is not something that one can gain by simply absorbing the energy within the dragon transformation pool. Yang's opinion sounded while Lin Dong felt a little helpless. The former had been paying attention to Lin Dong's transformation during this period of time. By relying on the overbearing devouring power of the devouring ancestral symbol, Lin Dong was able to swallow the energy within the dragon transformation pool like a whale. However, other than Lin Dong's metal-like black bones becoming darker, there were no other changes. Clearly, the reason was not because he had absorbed an insufficient amount of energy. Oh? Have you discovered something? Lin Dong gradually calmed down and inquired in his mind. Yang was after all an old fox and there were many aspects in which Lin Dong could not compare to him. According to what the dragon tribe has said, the experts who successfully managed to obtain the ancient dragon bone did not know exactly what happened in that moment when they obtained the dragon bone. Moreover, I am also not very familiar with the so-called dragon bone of the dragon tribe. Yang's tone was flat. He paused for a moment before continuing. However, my master back then had once seen this ancient dragon transformation pool. Back then, he said that true strength was not simply the strength of one's physical body. Not simply the strength of one's physical body. Lin Dong frowned slightly and mused for a moment. The words of the symbol ancestor were not overly deep. Besides training one's physical body, there was another path, mental energy. Could it be that one not only required a powerful physical body but also a certain level of mental energy in order to obtain this ancient dragon bone? I am uncertain. Yang hesitated for a moment before replying. Lin Dong nodded. He was quiet for a long time before he suddenly gritted his teeth. A thought passed through his mind and a sliver of mental energy surged out from his Yuan Palace. However, the surrounding black pool water surged over the moment this wisp of mental energy was emitted. Traces of black energy adhered to it and an ear-piercing sound was emitted. Pain. An intense pain, which was even clearer than the previous breaking down of his bones, crazily surged into Lin Dong's mind when the ear-piercing sound was emitted, causing veins of blood to rise within his eyes. Lin Dong's fists were tightly clenched and his fingernails had even pierced into the flesh of his palm. A determined expression flashed across Lin Dong's eyes as he took a deep breath a moment later. Bang! As Lin Dong fiercely gritted his teeth, surging mental energy swept out from his Yuan Palace like floodwaters. The surrounding water seemed to boil as this surging mental energy gushed out. It crazily adhered to every single bit of mental energy, mercilessly cutting Lin Dong's boundless mental energy like sharp blades. A maddening intense pain rushed into Lin Dong's mind. This indescribable intense pain caused several bulging green veins to emerge on Lin Dong's face. As the intense pain surged into Lin Dong's mind like a flood, the giddiness within his head continued to accumulate. To his horror, he could feel his consciousness gradually diminishing. The intense pain created by this mental energy was even more intense compared to the breaking down of his bones from earlier. It was no wonder that those from the dragon tribe, who entered this place, firmly guarded their physical body and did not dare to allow their mental energy to seep out. Yang. Lin Dong's consciousness was a blur. He used his final bit of clear-headedness to urgently cry out within his mind. However, Yang's voice had completely disappeared this time. It was as though Yang had been isolated from him. Damn it! Lin Dong cursed in his heart. However, with his consciousness gradually disappearing, he could feel that he had lost control of his body. Will I fail in such a manner? Lin Dong muttered deep within his heart as his consciousness was lost. His consciousness had finally descended into darkness. Amidst this darkness, Lin Dong could vaguely feel his consciousness continuously sinking as water moved around him. There was no concept of time here. Hence, in his fuzzy state of mind, Lin Dong did not know how long he sunk in this darkness. The only thing he could do was firmly guard his last thread of consciousness while floating in this darkness. Although that trace of consciousness appeared like a small boat within a raging storm, Lin Dong was aware that if he lost this final bit consciousness, he would never be able to recover again. Nevertheless, it was clearly not easy to guard this trace of consciousness amidst this endless deep darkness. Even though Lin Dong was tenacious, his last bit of consciousness was slowly being eroded as time seemed to flow by year. Really, am I going to die here? A mumbling voice was emitted from the depths of Lin Dong's consciousness. That trace of consciousness seemed to be like a firefly that was emitting its final light before disappearing. However, the trace of consciousness that belonged to Lin Dong was about to vanish when a light figure suddenly appeared before him. It belonged to a slim young lady. The young lady had icy blue long hair and her eyes were completely ice cold. However, those extremely icy eyes were currently filled with anxiety. Soon after, a voice seemed to drift over from an extremely distant place. You promised me you won't die. The beautiful face gradually lost its young and inexperienced look from before, revealing a pretty appearance that could make all living things go crazy. It was Ying Huan. You promised me. You won't die. You won't die? The young lady's anxious cry penetrated the tremendous time and space between them and entered Lin Dong's blurry consciousness. It was akin to a huge stone being thrown into deathly still water, suddenly stirring many ripples. Huan. That consciousness which was about to vanish seemed to awaken at this moment while the deep darkness also began to crack an inch at a time like a crystal. Lin Dong suddenly opened his eyes as control of his body once again returned to him. Just as he was about to flee, his eyes looked at the scene around him and abruptly froze. What is this place? Lin Dong mumbled to himself. Shock was revealed in his eyes as they observed the surroundings. Presently, he was within a huge hall. Many figures were seated within, but the blood and flesh of these figures had already turned to nothingness. Only black skeletons remained seated like rocks. However, a vast, mighty and calm energy faintly emanated from them. This place was just like a burial ground. The scene was shifted from the mysterious burial ground where Lin Dong was present to a distant quiet ice mountain within the Dao sect in the eastern Xian region. A young lady was silently seated on an ice lotus on that same ice lake. Her tightly shut eyes suddenly opened at this moment as a frightened expression flashed across her originally cold and emotionless face. Her slim jade-like hand gently covered her chest as she felt a piercing pain. Although she did not know what had happened, she was clearly aware that she had just seen that familiar figure. Moreover, he was obviously facing a critical life and death situation. You promised me you will not die. The young lady's hand was slowly clenched as she softly muttered to herself. A rushing wind sound was suddenly transmitted from a great distance away. Soon after, a figure landed on the ice lake. Ying Xiaoxiao looked at the dazed young lady and hurriedly stepped forward as she asked, Huan, what is it? Elder sister, I just saw him. Ying Huan stared at Ying Xiaoxiao with icy eyes and said. Ying Xiaoxiao was startled. She asked in surprise, he has returned. I saw him here. Ying Huan shook her head. Her finger was pointing at her heart. Ying Xiaoxiao bitterly smiled. She merely thought of it as this lass missing a certain person far too much. Hence, she comforted her. Soon after, she sighed again. Her expression appeared exceptionally grave as she said, "I have received some news recently. It seems that there is some unusual activity within Yuan Gate." Ying Huan slightly knitted her brow. Ying Xiao could clearly sense the surrounding chilly air suddenly become much colder when the former heard the name Yuan Gate. "Father has said that Yuan Gate is likely planning on starting a war." Ying Xiao clenched her hand tightly. "Start a war, huh?" Ying Huan's pretty face did not show even the slightest ripple after hearing this shocking news. Soon after, an ice mountain-like arc appeared from the corners of her mouth. "Let them start it." Ying Huan slowly inhaled a breath of chilly air. It could be seen from her eyes that she seemed to have made a certain decision as she suddenly stood up and directly walked away from the ice lake. "Elder sister, I will need to leave Dao sect for a period of time." Ying Xiao looked at Ying Huan's back and hastily asked, "Why?" Ying Huan paused. White cold chi spread from within her body. It froze her body into an ice statue, and a split second later, the ice statue shattered and her body strangely disappeared. "I am going to take back something that belongs to me." The young lady's calm voice reverberated over the ice lake as her body mysteriously disappeared. It was completely silent in this large ancient hall, which was covered by dust that had accumulated over the years. Lin Dong was startled as he stared at the many black skeletons. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. After all, he never expected that there would actually be such a mysterious place located within the dragon transformation pool. "It seems like this place is the key to obtaining an ancient dragon bone," Yang's startled voice sounded at this moment. Lin Dong nodded. This bone burial site was hidden within the dragon transformation pool, and one would have to use one's mental energy in order to locate it. However, it was clearly foolish and dangerous to release one's mental energy in a place like that. In fact, despite Lin Dong's tough and tenacious character, he had nearly sunk into the darkness and completely became part of the energy within the dragon transformation pool. Only those who possess massive guts and were able to block the erosion from the sinking darkness would finally be able to arrive at this place and obtain the opportunity to gain an ancient dragon bone. Previously, Lin Dong's eyes flashed. "I? That little girlfriend of yours, Ying Huan, helped you?" Yang said. How did she do it? Lin Dong was at a loss for words. How could Ying Huan detect his current state from the extremely distant eastern Xian region? Moreover, she had even showed up to lend him a hand. She is naturally able to sense it since her heart is there. Yang's voice had an additional tinge of mystery at this moment. However, I will have to remind you that since she is able to perform such a feat, it is likely that the reincarnated soul within her body has already awakened and begun to merge with her body. Otherwise, she will not possess that ability. Lin Dong suddenly clenched his hand. When he was sinking into the darkness, he was still able to see the young lady's icy blue long hair. It was the same sight as when he first saw Ying Huan made contact with the reincarnated soul. Her pretty and pampered self from back then no longer existed. Only a foreign, icy mountain-like chillness was present. I should settle the problem in front of me first. Lin Dong inhaled a deep breath of air and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. Soon after, he lifted his head and looked at the bone burial hall in front of him. A glint of perseverance flashed across his eyes. He had to become very powerful. Therefore, he must obtain an ancient dragon bone. Lin Dong lifted his feet and slowly advanced. The soft sound of footsteps reverberated across this large quiet hall. Many black skeletons were seated quietly within the large hall, and there were no signs of life from them. However, it was still possible to detect a frightening strength surging from them. Even after a long time, one must not underestimate these skeletons. These bones are all top-grade dragon bones. Lin Dong could tell that the dragon bones here were all of the same color as those within his body. Clearly, these dragon bones were all top-grade bones. Moreover, as Lin Dong advanced further, the color on those skeletons also grew increasingly darker. This discovery caused Lin Dong's heart to pound, while excitement rose from deep within his eyes. He quickly increased his pace and walked across the hall. Then, he suddenly stopped. Meanwhile, his breathing also became a little more ragged. Lindong's footsteps came to a halt. His face was accompanied by shock as he looked in front of him. At that spot were 8 bronze platforms. At the moment, there was a skeleton seated on each bronze platform. These 8 skeletons were not black. Instead, they were of a dark golden color. Dark golden light flowed over the 8 skeletons. This was a golden light that could not be removed even with the passage of time. An indescribable pressure quietly radiated from the skeletons and enveloped the entire bone burial hall. Lindong's lips were a little dry as he looked at the 8 dark golden skeletons. The strength of these dragon bones clearly far surpassed that of those top-grade dragon bones from before. Clearly, these 8 dragon skeletons were the legendary ancient dragon bones. Moreover, there were 4 other bronze platforms beside these 8 bronze platforms. However, there were somewhat darker skeletons seated on those 4 platforms. The strength that they contained was far inferior to that of the 8 ancient dragon bones. Nevertheless, the most surprising thing was that they were still able to hold their positions. The strength within these 4 ancient dragon bones have already been absorbed by others. Yang's eyes were sharp and he managed to uncover some clues at the first glance. Lindong was startled. Promptly, he quickly fell into deep thought. Could it be that in order to obtain the ancient dragon bone, one must absorb the strength within the ancient dragon bone in order to further strengthen the dragon bones in one's body? That should be the case. Moreover, even if the energy within these ancient dragon bones were absorbed, the skeletons would not turn into dust. Instead, they will continue to quietly absorb the energy from the dragon transformation pool. Perhaps, they will once again turn back into ancient dragon bones in the future. Yang explained. I see. Lindong came to a sudden comprehension. In that case, wouldn't it imply that the number of ancient dragon bones here would grow with time? Lindong quietly mocked himself when he thought of this. Judging from the looks of the 4 skeletons by the side, it seems like it take an extremely long time before they become ancient dragon bones again. There are actually 12 ancient dragon bones here. It seems like the dragon tribe has produced some powerful individuals over the years. Lindong smacked his lips together and spoke in surprise. Typically speaking, most dragon tribe experts that possess ancient dragon bones have reached the reincarnation stage. In other words, the 8 ancient dragon bones in front of him implied 8 reincarnation stage experts. This lineup was truly terrifying. After all, the dragon tribe is a tribe that has existed since the ancient times. There is nothing shocking about the fact that they possess such a solid foundation. Yang was not surprised at all. He paused for a moment before returning to the main topic. Although we have found the ancient dragon bones, it does not mean that you have succeeded. Not only do these ancient dragon bones contain extremely vast and mighty energy, but their will from when they were alive are also hidden in these skeletons. If you are careless, not only would you fail to absorb the energy, but your consciousness might end up being destroyed by their powerful will. Lindong was not surprised when he heard this. After all, if it was an easy feat to obtain these ancient dragon bones, such bones wouldn't be this rare. I am already here. Even if it is fraught with danger, I will still give it a try. Lindong parted his lips into a smile. He immediately took a step forward and stood in front of a dark golden skeleton. His eyes were searing hot as he stared at that dark golden skeleton. This skeleton was seated, with a golden light flowing over its surface. Its metallic-like indestructible body was not straight. Instead, it was bent slightly and even its head was lowered slightly. It looked as though it was worshipping something. Worship? Lindong suddenly narrowed his eyes. Tilting his head, he looked at the tens of thousands of black skeletons buried in this place. All of these skeletons were seated quietly. However, if one was to look carefully, one would realize that their demeanor were exactly the same as that of the dark golden skeletons. However, the direction in which they were worshipping was the 8 dark golden skeletons seated on bronze platforms. However, why was it that these dark golden skeletons were also adopting a worshipping stance? Lindong turned his eyes towards the remaining 7 dark golden skeletons and discovered that they also seemed to have the same stance. This discovery caused his eyes to flicker. A moment later, he suddenly took a step back and turned around. His eyes looked in the direction where the 8 dark golden skeletons were facing. There was a huge pillar at that spot, and that pillar was made of a unique material. It was neither gold nor wood. Moreover, there were also various huge flying dragon drawings all over it. Such a pillar was quite common in this large hall, and Lin Dong had seen many of them along the way. However, only this pillar alone caused Lin Dong's heart to palpitate. "Lin Dong, look at the top of the pillar!" Yang's startled voice suddenly sounded. Lin Dong lifted his head before his sharp eyes turned towards the top of the 10,000 feet tall pillar. There, one could vaguely see a figure present at the peak. "Is that?" Lin Dong's pupils shrunk. His toes pressed on the ground before his body shot upwards. Within a short couple of breaths' time, he had already reached the top of the pillar. Lin Dong suddenly felt his body sinking just as he was about to reach the top of the pillar, and even his knees bent slightly. If he had not hurriedly stabilized his body, it was likely that he would have knelt down immediately. Nonetheless, it still caused Lin Dong's heart to be in shock. There was a familiar dragon tribe's pressure in this place. However, the pressure this time around was so frightening that it exceeded that of everyone whom he had met before. Even Elder Qingji. Lin Dong slowly lifted his head while feeling shocked in his heart. Then, he saw a lotus stone platform a short distance in front of him. There was a figure seated on the stone platform at the moment. The figure appeared fairly skinny. The dark golden luster, which appeared strangely powerful, was absent on his body. At a first glance, this skeleton appeared just like the most precious jade in the world. It was crystal clear, and if one was to observe carefully, it was even possible to see traces of jade meridians within the bones. This jade skeleton could only be described by the word perfect. Lin Dong's mind involuntarily became absent-minded upon seeing it. However, he quickly recovered his senses. His heart was in shock as he asked, "Whose skeleton is this? Why does it possess such frightening pressure?" A storm brewed within Lin Dong's heart at this moment. From what Yuan Qian had mentioned, the strongest dragon bone in the dragon tribe should be the ancient dragon bone. Yet, this perfect jade skeleton in front of him had clearly far surpassed the other 8 dark golden ancient dragon bones. With shock in his heart, Lin Dong shifted his attention downwards. Subsequently, he discovered that there were 6 crystal-clear fingers on both hands of that jade skeleton. "Is that?" Yang's surprised voice suddenly sounded. "6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor? 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor?" Lin Dong was startled. He felt that this name was extremely domineering. Then, he carefully asked, "Who is he?" "Someone who once unified the entire demonic beast world." Lin Dong's pupils shrunk immediately. Unified the demonic beast world. Lin Dong was dazed as he blankly stared at the jade-like skeleton before him. A storm involuntarily brewed within his heart. This was because he clearly understood just how terrifying an achievement these few simple words represented. The demonic beast world was obviously even more chaotic during ancient times. Various warlords reigned over their territories, while many great overlord tribes occupied the land. The accumulated resources and foundations of these tribes were clearly not inferior to the dragon tribe. It was not a problem for the dragon tribe to fight them as equals. However, it would definitely be wishful thinking to unify the demonic beast world and make these proud tribes submit. Yet, Yang had said that when this jade skeleton was alive, he had actually managed to unify the demonic beast world. Just how terrifying was such power? He was indeed extremely powerful. In those ancient times, amongst the 8 masters, only the Ice Master and Devouring Master had no problems beating this 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor. The other 6 could only be considered equal to him. Yang sighed. Lin Dong's mouth was slightly agape. The 8 masters of ancient times represented the pinnacle during that ancient era. Yet, this 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor was actually comparable to them. It seemed that his strength was also out of this world. There were many powerful individuals in that ancient era. Although the 8 ancient masters were extremely strong, there were still a few peak experts who could match them. Yang chuckled. Lin Dong nodded. The 8 ancient masters were from the line of the symbol ancestor. There was perhaps no one in the world who could reach the level of the symbol ancestor, but by relying on other kinds of capabilities, it was still possible to compete with the 8 ancient masters. However, the demonic beast world ultimately honors strength. Although the demonic beast world was eventually unified under the imposing might of the six-finger sage dragon emperor and the external pressure of the world war, after the death of the six-finger sage dragon emperor, the dragon tribe no longer had the power to make the other overlord tribes submit. In the end, the demonic beast world was split again. Lin Dong nodded again. He was well aware of the desire to fight and the wild nature that flowed within the demonic beast's bones. Other than being bounded by their tribe, it was extremely difficult to make them submit. It is unexpected that this skeleton was actually so powerful when it was still alive. No wonder it possessed such a mighty aura. Lin Dong fondled his chin and looked at the jade skeleton before his eyes. Excitement continued to gather within his black eyes as he laughed. It seems that this dragon bone is even stronger than those ancient dragon bone below. Why don't I choose it? Choose it. Yang's voice seemed to have become strange at this moment. Do you really think that those lucky members of the dragon tribe who had come to this place during the past tens of thousands of years did not discover this jade dragon bone? However, none of them succeeded in the end. What does this mean? Clearly, this jade dragon bone is not something that an ordinary person can accept. Moreover, you should be able to feel just how terrifying the energy contained within this jade stone skeleton is, right? Lin Dong pursed his lips and nodded. He had sensed the terrifying power within the jade skeleton the moment he set his eyes on it. Merely sensing this power caused his body to tremble. It was likely that even all 8 of the ancient dragon bones below combined could not compare to this jade skeleton. Therefore, he clearly understood that he would very likely be exploded apart by the tremendous energy if he was to absorb this jade skeleton. Moreover, there was definitely a will left behind by the six-finger sage dragon emperor inside the skeleton. Even after so many eons, the will of such a powerful expert was definitely not something he could easily withstand. Therefore, the level of danger could be considered suicidal. I am aware that this is extremely dangerous, and there might even be a need to pay an extremely terrible price, however, I need it. Lin Dong slightly lowered his eyes. The young lady, who had appeared in the darkness earlier, surfaced in his mind once again. Although he did not come into direct contact with her, he was still able to detect some changes in the young lady. Such changes might become even greater in future. Lin Dong faintly felt that when Ying Huan's strength truly reached the apex, she would perhaps really transform into that unfamiliar ice master. The difference in their strength seemed to be gradually widening. This was something that Lin Dong was extremely opposed to. Therefore, he needed to do all he could to raise his strength. Truly a crazy fellow. Yang sighed helplessly. He did not expect that Ying Huan's identity as the Ice Master's reincarnation would end up stirring such intense determination to grow stronger within Lin Dong. Nevertheless, this was not a bad thing from a certain point of view. You can try if you really wish to. I will do all I can to protect you. If it is really not possible, you will just have to give up. Yang pondered for a moment before speaking. Many thanks. Lin Dong nodded with gratitude. Soon after, he deeply inhaled a breath of air and walked forward. Finally, he stopped in front of the lotus stone base. His arm reached out in a slow but steady manner and lightly touched the crystal-clear jade skeleton. Bang! An indescribably terrifying pressure suddenly swept out from within the skeleton the moment Lin Dong's finger touched it. Lin Dong's body instantly sunk as cracks spread from his feet. Lin Dong tightly gritted his teeth. He could feel the frightening pressure around him, and even the bones within his body gave off cracking noises. If it was not because his bones had already transformed into top-grade dragon bones earlier, it was likely that just this pressure alone would be enough to shatter the bones within his body. The pressure spread. In the end, it enveloped the entire bone burial hall. The tens of thousands of already somewhat bent bodies of the skeleton seemed to lower even further. Light suddenly gathered deep within the eyes of the jade skeleton while Lin Dong was tenaciously resisting the frightening pressure around him. In the end, the light shot into Lin Dong's black eyes. In that moment, his mind seemed to collapse as a giddiness swept over him. It was as though he was being sucked into a certain realm. This giddiness quickly faded. However, Lindong discovered that the scenery around him had changed drastically by the time he once again steadied his heart. It seemed to be an endlessly spacious wilderness, and an ancient aura reverberated over it. How interesting. It is unexpected that even a human is able to enter my dragon tribe's secret place. A faint voice suddenly resounded in the sky while Lindong was feeling lost in this foreign land. The voice contained an indescribably powerful aura, and even the world seemed to become much dimmer under this mighty aura. Lindong was shaken as he lifted his head. After which, he looked at the distant sky and saw a lotus stone base. There was a purple-clothed man quietly sitting below this lotus stone base. This man was rather handsome. The imposing and dignified aura between his brows made one's heart tremble. Slender hands extended from his sleeves, and there were 6 perfect fingers on each of them. 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor. Lindong felt his scalp become numb. Evidently, this person in front of him was an ultimate ferocious individual who had once united the demonic beast world. Although this was only a remnant will of his, it was still extremely frightening. The current dragon tribe seems to be a lot more lax with regards to this secret place. The purple-clothed man looked towards Lindong. His faint voice caused a chill to rise in Lindong's body. Elder, only members of the dragon tribe are currently able to enter this dragon transformation pool. The reason I am able to enter is because I helped the dragon tribe and they decided to make an exception and allow me to enter the dragon transformation pool. Lindong hurriedly explained. The current dragon tribe actually requires your help. The purple-clothed man frowned slightly. Lindong smiled bitterly. He was aware that his exterior strength could not enter the eyes of this ultimate expert and quickly explained the matter of the devil-suppressing prison. Those fellows actually placed the devil-suppressing prison under the dragon region. The purple-clothed man was startled upon hearing Lindong's explanation. However, his eyes were a little warmer when he looked at Lindong again. There are many familiar scents on you. Lindong laughed dryly. This 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor was indeed terrifying. He had managed to see the many secrets within Lindong's body with a single glance. Little one, the fact that you can come to this place shows that you do possess some ability. Although you have been a great help to the dragon tribe, it might be a little naive of you to think that you can obtain the primal dragon bone of my dragon tribe with just this. The purple-clothed man smiled. I only wish to give it my all. Lindong said. He was naturally not naive enough to believe that this ultimate expert in front of him would hand it over so easily. There have been 18 people who came to this place before you. All of them were top experts of the dragon tribe. However, none of them succeeded in the end. The purple-clothed man smiled slightly. He looked down upon Lindong and asked, "Do you think that you can succeed? Although it is extremely difficult, it is likely that Elder will simply send me flying with a slap if I do not even possess the courage to challenge it." Lindong laughingly said. The purple-clothed man was startled. Soon after, he could not help but chuckle. What an interesting little one. Since that is the case, I will let you have a try. What do I need to do? Lindong was eager. The purple-clothed man grinned as his slender 6-finger hand slowly extended. At the same time, an extremely terrifying aura swept apart in a manner that blotted out the sun. There seemed to be an endless giant purplish gold dragon coiling behind him. Soon after, a laughter which caused Lindong's expression to stiffen slowly spread. Defeat me. The land suddenly trembled amidst this silence as waves rose in the black dragon transformation pool below. The black pool seemed to flicker with purplish gold light as an indescribably ancient dragon roar emanated from deep within, shaking the land. The eyes of Yuan Qian's group abruptly opened. They gazed upon the disturbance within the dragon transformation pool as unconcealable shock finally surged upon their usually calm faces. Someone has challenged Ancestor. This video will end here.